What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Muscle Memoirs Podcast. Today, I am super excited to be joined by Dr. Spencer Nadolsky. Dr. Nadolsky, how are you doing today?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on.
It's my pleasure. For our listeners who might not be familiar with you, I think our audience, for the most part, should be familiar. And I would even say if they're not directly familiar with you, they've probably stumbled across one of your memes on social media. But for the very few who haven't, could you provide us with a little background about yourself?
Yeah, originally NCAA athlete turned physician, and kind of a physician who promotes lifestyle aggressively as medicine, but also very well into pharmacology. So I'm a family medicine specialist, and then I specialize further into obesity medicine and what's called lipidology, the study of lipids, like cholesterol and triglycerides and that type of thing. So, but I'm also the chief physician for Renaissance periodization. So I'm part of the group of all the doctors and RDs over there. So, zealots on weightlifting and nutrition, basically, to get people healthier.
Fantastic. That's what we love here. And just to make sure everyone's on the same page, this is a conversation between a male dietitian and a doc who lifts and strongly encourages his patients to lift. It might as well be a conversation between a unicorn and a Sasquatch. This is great stuff, people, and this is going to be an awesome discussion. To set the stage for that, our general topic is weight or body size and the relationship with health. And perhaps the best way to start this conversation, Dr. Nadolsky, is basically determining what is a good way to measure this, a normal body weight or a normal body size. And I think most of us in the fitness community, we like to bash on BMI because it might not respond to this niche population. But as far as a general measurement goes, for most people, does BMI hold a good deal of value? Can it more or less predict health in the general population?
Yeah, it's a good screening method. The reason we use it is because obviously it's cheap, it's easy. The medical assistant, when a person comes in, can do it right then and there. They get their height and they get their weight. You know, it's kilograms per meter squared is the term. Now the thing is, it's not perfect. In fact, the taller you are, the more skewed it can be towards seeming higher than what it should be based on, your other anthropometric measures and whatever. But like, it does a decent job in what we call the general population. So if you look at the fitness population, and these are the caveats to the BMI, we tend to have more muscle, and the BMI will be skewed a little bit higher. And so that's the biggest argument. It's like, what? My BMI, the doctor said I was overweight, and you can see my abs. So like me, for instance, I have abs, and my BMI is like 27, 28. I've never seen that put in my chart before. I think they'd think twice about doing that to me, but I don't actually tell them I'm a doctor until later in the conversation if they don't know that. And of course, unless they've seen one of my memes, of course. No, it's not. I'm only mildly popular, not very popular, mildly. And it's a small population. Anyway, so yeah, BMI does a great job. It just, and only for what it's used for. It should be used to screen. You shouldn't diagnose someone with obesity just based off of that. Unfortunately, that our electronic medical records, if your BMI is calculated that way, it goes, hey, you better add obesity. It's like, whoa, hold on a second. You got to take in muscularity into account and other things. So I'd say in a general population, it's fine. Again, we go further and use waist circumference because where you store the fat's actually probably more important, especially below a BMI of 35. So just to go over for the audience, they probably already know this, but like it's about whatever is it, 18 or whatever to 25 BMI is considered normal weight. Again, I say normal in quotations because it can vary a little bit. These are just kind of general population statistics. And then you go from that 25 to 30, and that's called overweight. I should say over 25, below 30. 30 to below 35 is class 1 obesity. 35 to below 40 is class 2, and over 40 BMI is class 3, what most people refer to as like morbid obesity. We don't really use that anymore. We get a little bit more specific because it's probably better to be a little bit more specific when we're getting into the nuance and complexities of obesity. So those are the categories. When you get over when you're below a 35 BMI, the waist circumference is pretty predictive. You should probably start getting waist circumference. So, for example, me, I have some muscle, but and doesn't look like I have a big waist circumference, but you still check my waist circumference because my BMI is over 25, and it's nice and trim. So there are patients that are like, I have like a 32 BMI, but I'm mostly muscle, but their waist circumference is elevated, and that does put them at a higher risk. It doesn't matter if they have a lot of muscle. So that's kind of the gist of it, of how we do in the clinic. Ideally, we'd get a DEXA scan on everybody and be a little bit more specific. It's just time intensive. We don't have as much data on it. We're getting more data, time, and all that, and money. That's really the issue.
Fantastic overview. I'm in the same boat. Last time I checked, I'm in the overweight BMI as well, and I don't think my body composition would represent that either. But if we throw aside these, relatively active individuals with above average levels of muscle mass, and we kind of accept that this is a pretty good predictor of health generally when it comes to the general population. If we look at overweight and obese BMIs in the general population, what do we see in terms of risk of disease and perhaps further all-cause mortality? Can it be as simple as these subjects are at an increased risk, or you already touched on some nuances there, but perhaps we just elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so in general, again, where you store the fat is probably the biggest predictor. So if some people are storing it around their butt and their legs, although that's kind of in more popular now in terms of what some people want to look a little bit thicker there, but before it was kind of a vanity thing. But that weight around the legs, the fat around there, if anything, it might be protective of certain things. Whereas if you have it around your waist, specifically around your organs, that's where you start seeing some of these health issues. So, for example, I'm doing a whole sequence of PowerPoints for the RP YouTube channel, and really the fat stored around there, it causes all the different little things that we see that lead to cardiovascular disease. And then there's other things beyond what we'd call this sick fat or adiposopathy, the metabolically harmful fat around your organs. But then just having more mass in general everywhere else can do things like sleep apnea if you have it around your neck. And of course, just having more mass in general puts more weight on your bones, just more weight in general, more abdominal pressure, reflux, urinary incontinence, that type of thing. But in general, you see an increased risk specifically with abdominal obesity towards higher blood pressure, higher blood sugars, type 2 diabetes, dyslipidemia, those types of things, what we really care about is, the hard outcome type of stuff like cardiovascular disease and death. So, in my first video, I'd show this little chart because I like talking about metabolically healthy versus unhealthy obesity because I think it's important to discuss that nuance, because does everybody need to be as lean as possible when it's miserable to do so in some individuals? So it's interesting to know that. But when you look at it, it's like the metabolically unhealthy folks, they're at the highest risk of all-cause mortality and cardiovascular death. Whereas, if you're metabolically healthy and you're doing pretty well and you're fit, despite having more adiposity or fat, you're not at much higher risk than someone who is lean and metabolically healthy. And in fact, you're probably you're better off having excess adipose and being metabolically healthy than someone who's technically leaner and metabolically unhealthy. So those little things are important. But yeah, in general, more adipose tissue, more risk of all these different things.
Absolutely. And I think those are some super important nuances in regard to terms, and that is this concept of metabolically healthy obesity and the fact that someone can be normal weight, quote unquote, by BMI standards and
Right.
perhaps be metabolically unhealthier than that person who has a much higher BMI than them. And as we're kind of getting at here, perhaps a large portion of that can be due to visceral adiposity. Would that be correct in explaining
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It's where the fat's stored, and that's for a few reasons. Just because where the fat is in relation to the portal vein and your liver and all that stuff, the fatty acids can get released and really start getting into all of our different organs, and there may be endocrine effects. That's what they think as well from the fat that's stored there versus around your legs or thighs or butt. So that's kind of the gist.
Excellent. I think this brings us into a similar topic, and that is the role of weight loss in potentially improving physical markers of health. So, as we've touched on here, just having a specific BMI within a range doesn't necessarily dictate that someone might need to lose weight to improve their health. You can be of a larger size and be perfectly healthy, but in regard to visceral adiposity, regardless of the BMI range you're in, there are some benefits to reducing some of that. Can you outline for the listeners, just generally speaking, around how much weight loss are we looking at when it comes to having a significant change in physical markers of health that would be advantageous?
Yeah, the general rule of thumb is around 5 to 10% of your weight. It'll be different for everybody. Everybody has what we think is called this like personal threshold of fat or adipose, to where someone that can be relatively thinner according to BMI can gain a little bit of fat, and all of a sudden their metabolic markers go off the charts, whereas someone else could gain 100 pounds and still seem to be doing okay metabolically wise. So, but in general, 5 to 10% of weight loss, we see those clinical markers improve. The ideal situation. So if you have someone who's thin, according to, I wouldn't even say lean. I would say thin, according to the BMI, but they're kind of under muscled. They're kind of frail, but they have a lot of fat. That's where it's like, well, do you have them lose weight? Because maybe losing weight might actually be detrimental because they're so frail. So that's where body recomposition, lifting weights, eating more protein, and then losing fat, trying to gain muscle at the same time may come into play. But in general, I'll just say 5 to 10% for the general people. Yeah.
Great. And are there certain physical markers of health that seem to respond better to weight loss than others? An idea that is coming to mind from our conversation right now is all of this work coming from Roy Taylor, right? And this twin cycle hypothesis, and how we tend to correlate type 2 diabetes with being overweight or obese, but people with a normal BMI can also have type 2 diabetes, and this seems to revolve around this visceral adiposity and the liver and pancreas having an abnormal amount of fat for that individual exceeding their personal fat threshold. So with that being said, would perhaps markers of glycemic control respond more favorably to weight loss, or are there any standout metrics there?
Yeah, blood sugar, triglycerides, blood pressure, the standard kind of metabolic syndrome markers. For something like sleep apnea, you generally have to see, more like 10, 15, 20% weight loss to have improvement. And it's no guarantee, but the blood sugars, you see rapid improvements. Blood pressure, you generally start seeing improvement. Dyslipidemia, not as much the HDL quickly, but the triglycerides, you see massive improvement. So, that's by far what we see quickly happening.
Considering these benefits of weight loss, it can be the case that, regardless of whether or not it may be beneficial for the individual, perhaps there are some contraindications to them losing weight, even if it would improve specific physical markers. As a clinician, when you have a patient come in, what are some contraindications where this person might be able to benefit from losing weight, but now in this current moment just isn't the right time? What might signal that to you?
It's usually it's the patients that may have a history of eating disorders and issues with multiple failure attempts in the past, to where they need to take a rest on trying to diet, get out of this dieting mindset, I would say. Get off the dieting, mouse wheel or whatever, rat wheel. Those are the patients. The other people are like, oh, are they elderly, frail, low bone mineral density? Those types of things. In general, though, it's what I see is where it's like, hey, they need to just stop dieting. They're too obsessed with this idea. They failed so often, and that doesn't mean they can't try again in the future, but maybe it's time to focus on non-weight, non-scale type of behaviors. So exercise and fitness, while some people, equate that with weight loss, it's not really great for weight loss, as you know, but good for, it works, it helps, but it's not the main thing. So it's mostly the dieting that we want to maybe get away with those patients. But getting stronger in the gym, working on sleep, and some of these maybe dietary patterns that don't necessarily result in weight loss, but maybe overall food quality improvement. That's what I would say. Obviously things like cancer, those are stuff that we wouldn't mess around with either, trying to lose weight. But that's what that would be my answer.
You mentioned other lifestyle factors there, which I would love to explore further. So if we have this individual, they might not be ready to lose weight right now, but there are some other avenues we can explore to improve their current condition. Perhaps you could touch on some more specifics if we're looking at this person's panel and perhaps they have elevated cholesterol or triglycerides or impaired fasting blood glucose. What are some of the routes you might take in regard to specific dietary changes to improve some of those markers? Anything come to mind for that?
Yeah, so dietary patterns for like LDL cholesterol are not really weight related changes. Weight can have an effect on LDL, but it's the biggest effects is more like soluble fiber, saturated fat, poly and monounsaturated fat. So what you do is you really switch to more of a whole food. I hate to say plant-based because there's a lot of whatever, but mostly whole food kind of plant-based type of style where you're eating mostly vegetables, lentils, oats, and fruit, nuts and seeds, and the protein that you're getting is, you don't have to be completely animal free, but like, you're not getting butter or coconut oils. You're getting mostly avocados, nuts, and seeds. And if you do get animals, probably from fish type of thing. So that's in general what you do for just LDL or total cholesterol. For triglycerides, though, going to a lower carb whole food type of diet tends to work even regardless of weight loss. And glycemia too. Most people think glycemia will only improve with weight loss, and that's the underlying insulin resistance, and that's, you mentioned Roy Taylor. But if you can actually lower glycemia just by not eating carbohydrates, and that's where the low carbers fight with everybody. And the thing is, I'm pretty reasonable. I agree in some respects that a low carb diet will improve glycemia without weight loss, especially if they do it right. Most people will lose weight if they switch that anyway, but you'll probably see a little bit of glycemic improvement. But that doesn't get away from kind of that whole food approach. I wouldn't be giving people Atkins shakes and stuff like that unless it helped them lose weight, of course. But those are the general thing. And then the other things, though, like not dietary wise, sleep. People that staying up all night looking at their phone, watching Netflix or whatever. If you improve sleep, there's improved weight loss just without even necessarily trying. And just feeling better in general to then move more, which is important because you want to feel good to be able to do the exercise and weightlifting and walking more. So those start focusing on those things, start focusing on fitness as opposed to the scale, and then good things can happen, and then you can focus on the weight loss later, if need be.
Low carb Twitter is going to be so disappointed in you for even suggesting it might be a good idea to decrease saturated fat.
Oh yeah, but at least maybe I'll make up for it when they say that I gave them props for improving glycemia. So whatever.
Potentially. I think that is an interesting topic as far as going low carb, independent of weight loss and improving glycemia, because there is this argument, right, that we're just kind of putting a Band-Aid over the issue and we're not actually improving anything, right? Because then if we just expose this person to an oral glucose tolerance test, it would probably be better, if not worse.
Yeah.
Am I mistaken in saying that?
Yeah. That's the truth. And whether it matters though, because if somebody just, like if somebody sticks with the low carb diet, then it's like, well, who cares, I guess, Now, whether it improves outcomes, I can't say for sure. I would assume it would improve microvascular outcomes, the things that retinopathy, neuropathy, those types of things. Whether it improves macrovascular, like cardiovascular outcomes, that's kind of what I'm studying. After this first study that I do with just looking at healthy folks, looking at ketogenic diets and atherosclerosis, I would like to get into some of these groups. I'm talking to some big keto groups, maybe to think about progression of atherosclerosis in unhealthier populations. So we'll see. I don't want to give too much away because I want to make some connections and talk about this further, but it needs to be studied, because if that's the case, then we have a pretty cool tool to use for some of these people. Not everybody, but would be interesting.
Absolutely. I love that you're exploring it, and I think I speak for the nutrition community as a whole when I say that it truly is appreciative, considering this current obesogenic environment and the rise of disease. When we look at the statistical models, things don't appear to be getting any better in the years to come. So something has to change. So exploring these different avenues is greatly appreciated. On the Muscle Memoirs, Dr. Nadolsky, we're all about providing balance here. And we're talking about weight loss and potential benefits, and some candidates who might be ready to lose weight, others who might not be. Something that is rising in popularity, I would say, is intuitive eating as a dietary strategy. And as you well know, there are consistent positive outcomes from this approach. It is a weight-neutral strategy, but it does tend to promote improvements in disordered eating behavior, improvements in how one views their body. And these are all fantastic things, but I think the issue comes when they become fond of this approach and they may take their position too far. And I quite commonly see practitioners who would put forth that no one should ever try to lose weight ever. And to justify that claim, they'll bring up the statistics on weight loss maintenance in the long term, the failure rates, because as we know, we seem to be pretty good at losing weight. We're just horrible at keeping it off. So they might suggest that, well, you're never going to be able to keep it off in the long term anyway, so you should just become comfortable with who you are and living in this body. And then another thing that they'll put on the table is that there are these consequences to weight cycling over the lifespan. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that idea and the research you've seen. Is weight cycling a significant risk factor in regard to diseases or just all-cause mortality? Are bodybuilders everywhere increasing their risk of death?
Yeah, so the research, the most up-to-date stuff basically says if you're lean, relatively lean, so this is where it comes into disordered eating. And you see this on Fitstagram. This isn't, you'll see some in the general population, but this is really a selection bias on Instagram and the fitness world online, because that's where all the really fitness fanatics get together, and you'll see a higher prevalence. There's a higher percentage of these folks in this little niche as opposed to the general population. So people in the general clinic, they won't see, a medical clinic wouldn't see this as much. So you get a bunch of people that are relatively, I'm going to call them, maybe they have a 24, 25 BMI, maybe 26. Maybe they have, 10 to 20 pounds of vanity weight. These people reach out to me all the time. They're not just, I don't want to say just soccer moms because I don't want to do a gender bias type of thing, because they're soccer moms, but they're also guys too. It's everyone. It's everybody that just kind of a little bit of vanity weight. And clinically, they're healthy. They have no issues other than just, maybe a little bit of extra fat on their body that's just not clinically remarkable. It doesn't matter. It's not going to affect their health. And it's okay to want to lose weight for vanity reasons and look good. I have no problem with that. I do the same thing. However, some of these folks get obsessed with it. And what happens is that they obsess, they count their calories, they get very lean, and it's really hard to maintain a very lean body. Psychologically, physiologically, it can be hard. When I get very lean, testosterone goes down. I get tired. I feel really tired. And again, that goes to probably genetics and individuality, where some people can maintain feeling lean or being lean and being fine and not having any consequences. Other people, women lose their period, guys lose their testosterone, that type of thing. So when you look at weight cycling in that population, detrimental for sure. When you look at it especially because if you're weight cycling, you're probably going to be lowering your muscle mass and lean mass tissue, bone, muscle, whatever. But if you look at more of the obesity population, you don't see that detriment. There doesn't seem to be that same detriment. If anything, they've lost fat and at least have the area under the curve at a leaner weight to where those metabolic abnormalities weren't accumulating during that time where they're leaner. And then if they regain the weight and then lose it again, it doesn't seem to be detrimental. Psychologically, maybe. But however, physiologically, probably not. So where you see the issue is probably in the leaner, slightly overweight folks that are obsessed with their body image type of thing, and that's mostly where you see it. So I don't want anybody weight cycling anyway. Obviously, if a patient has, the issue is where people go into fad diets, so grapefruit diets, whatever. I don't know what it is. The newest thing, they'll do keto. I don't think keto is a fad diet, but they'll use it as a fad diet. The mindset. So they'll do all these different types of diets. I'm going to try keto. I'm going to try this. They'll lose some weight. They'll regain it, gain it back, right? Ideally, what you'd want to see in one of like my patients, they would try some sort of science-based, really comprehensive type of program where they did it scientifically and really had purpose doing it and had support. If they failed that a couple times, then that might be the time to step up therapy using medicines or maybe surgery if they qualify for that. But you wouldn't just let them keep flailing as a clinician. You just, you should just keep trying. That would be stupid. So psychologically, that would, why would you have them do that? But for the other people, they're weight cycling using fads, then you'd ideally get them on a sensible program. And if they failed that, then that's where you step up to medicines or surgery. For the other people, though, for, those general population folks who we're not talking about obesity, we're just talking about a little bit of vanity weight, that's where you may go, whoa. Stop cycling. Let's focus on, again, take away the focus on the scale weight and maybe focus on just your fitness while accepting that you probably shouldn't be walking around with a six-pack or something like that. That's
Fantastic. You mentioned surgery there, and I think this is a really fascinating area because we've acknowledged that in regard to long-term weight maintenance success after losing a substantial amount of weight, there's a pretty high failure rate, but this doesn't necessarily seem to be the case when it comes to weight loss surgery. Outcomes seem to be a little bit more favorable in the long term. But there is sort of this stigma surrounding surgery. I think you would have a better grasp of the attitude surrounding this as well as the research in it. And I would really enjoy it if you touched on both of these topics in regard to surgery.
Yeah, so surgery's our most powerful tool. It's it blows lifestyle out of the water. Or if you just compare surgery and lifestyle compared to lifestyle alone, it's not even close. And it pisses me off because I quite frankly wish it didn't have to come to surgery. Unfortunately, due to our body's mechanisms of fighting back and our environment, it requires in many individuals. I'm not going to just say a small percentage, because some people will say, "Oh, it should only be reserved for those a small percentage of the people with obesity." Really, we may think about it as it should be reserved for like a lot more people with obesity, and then that's part of the stigma and whatever. But it works extremely well. Now, it's only a tool. It's not a magic bullet. It strongly combats our physiologic drive of appetite. And of course, yes, you need psychological training and therapy along with it, because like I see patients, they'll eat through it. They got the initial appetite benefits, and they just find ways to drink shakes, milkshakes, and whatever else. Sliders, they'll call them. Easy little burgers and whatever else to eat. So, works extremely well. In general, it's people with a BMI of 35 with what we call obesity-related comorbidities, type 2 diabetes, that type of thing, or over a 40 BMI, and those people qualify. There's a stigma because people think that it's a magic bullet and it's just cheating, but really, like, it's not cheating. It just helps you. It helps you eat less, and it helps fight your body's drive. It gives you a chance to actually follow the habits that you want to do. Except that when you don't have the surgery, and some, it's just those drives are so strong that like you can't combat them every single day. And people think, nope, just try harder. And it's like, well, they did, and it's not working. So we got to get over that whole like it's willpower and whatever. Because someone like me, I'm trying to gain weight right now, and my appetite is not letting me I used to be a heavyweight wrestler, and I'm just I'm like 215, 220, but trying to gain like 5 pounds, and even trying to force feed myself, it's really hard. So whereas somebody with obesity, they're trying to lose weight and they're ravenous, even with what we would consider a normal caloric intake. So when I try to eat like 2,500, if I try to eat 2,500 calories, I'd be starving. So yeah, we put people on 1,200 and 1,500 calorie diets. Like, I don't know. So you can imagine. You're like, oh, just try harder. It's like, well, that's easier said than done. So.
Absolutely. Are you aware of any general figures off the top of your head in regard to the difference in success rate between lifestyle and surgery, and then perhaps which form of surgery currently seems to have the highest success rates?
Yeah, I don't want to give actual. There are a few studies that looked at this. There was one in like 2011, and there's newer cohorts coming out more and more showing actually like mortality benefits compared to those who didn't get surgery. So pretty cool stuff. And again, it's hard because it depends on the length of time you follow someone up. Like lifestyle by itself, we have to look at the definition of what we consider a success. Some people consider the success losing 10%, 5 to 10% or more, and keeping it off for a year. For surgery, though, like you end up losing more like 30% of your weight or more. And in general, the success rate, I don't even want to give a percentage because there's a few different cohorts that are differently, but it's massively higher. Like now, it's not even within a small magnitude. It's massively higher. Now, the thing is, you're getting surgery, and that's not without concern, but the complication rates have gone down. They have centers of excellence now that we've kind of gotten it to where these surgeons are really good at it. The most common one now, people are getting what's called a vertical sleeve gastrectomy, where they take your stomach and then almost turn it into what the size of a small banana. Whereas before, they would do what's called, and they still do this, a Roux-en-Y gastric bypass. But really interesting thing, they cut your stomach into a small pouch, and then they rearrange your intestines a little bit, and really powerful thing. It's just and it confers a little bit more improvement than the vertical sleeve gastrectomy, but they're doing the sleeve gastrectomy a little bit more often, maybe because of complications, maybe because of decreased complications in like absorption of nutrients afterwards. And there's still it's still very successful. So I do a lot of post-bariatric weight loss, like medication. So if like people are still struggling with weight or appetite, I start doing a lot of their medicines and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I think it's fun. It's, just use it as a tool. I have a lot of patients that have done it, and they're very happy they did it. Most people are happy they did it if they did it right.
Excellent. I couldn't agree more. Dr. Nadolsky, this has been an awesome discussion. We are to our last question, and it's unrelated, but it's definitely related to our topic today. And it's part of this informal meta-analysis of sorts I've been developing on the podcast. Whenever I have someone in the field, such as yourself, doing amazing work, I have to put out the question, and I'm curious to know the first thing that comes to mind when I say, when we look at the rising rates of cardiometabolic disease and obesity, where have we gone wrong in our continuous quest to attenuate this crisis? Should we be shifting our research focus or our priorities in the scientific community? What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, most people say we need to educate more. I don't think so. I think most people know that fried foods and chips and those things are probably not as good as vegetables. Everybody knows that. I don't think it takes education to figure that out. And I don't think you have to know the calorie counts on things. It does open people's eyes. So educating people is not the answer. Everybody will say that. Fitness people will say that. They're just wrong. I don't know what to say about that. What I would say is I wish I could say we could legislate that we cut out all these processed foods, but like then we get into Big Brother controlling our lives, and I don't think that's a good idea either. I don't have a great answer. I think we have to do something to prevent this in the first place. And if that comes down to legislation, maybe. I don't know. I wish there's a lot of issues. So like, I'm over here in San Diego, and if you go in my zip code, everybody's thin, white, and fit. And, obesity is not an issue here. You go down the road in a different zip code, and it's an issue. So it's not all money, but it's complicated. Social economic stuff, it definitely plays a role there, and somehow getting people to eat mostly whole foods when they're younger. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to legislate that. I don't know. Parenting's different, but it's just complicated. I wish I had a better answer for you, but I know it's not education, that's for sure.
No, I love that answer because I have similar ideas in regard to education. I always tell people when, they ask about being a dietitian or this and that, and they ask about things related to nutrition. It's fascinating because we live in a period of time where we have all of this access to information, anything you could possibly want to know. But people are more confused than ever when it comes to what to eat. Today we can't have carbs, the next day protein's bad for you, and then it's fat. And I always put forth, everyone knows fruits and vegetables are good for them.
Yeah.
So if somebody already knows that they should be eating more of these things, but they simply don't, like, yeah. How do we intervene with that person? Like, people have the basic education for the most part.
Yeah. I think it's analysis paralysis, whatever you want to say. I think people are just with stupid. We just don't need any more education. Like, we know we shouldn't be going to McDonald's, but why do you go to McDonald's? It's cheap, it's easy, it's pretty tasty, quick. Why? And it's not just McDonald's. It's whatever. The chips, the things that they taste so good. We know we shouldn't be scarfing these down, but we do because they taste so good. And why not? Oh, I don't feel like eating like apples and whatever after a stressful day. I want to eat some chips, you know? So like if I feel that way, someone with more brain dysfunction from their obesity is going to be way further off than I am. So, yeah. I wish education were the answer. That would be a lot easier. Then I could just say my memes are going to save the world. They help a lot of people, but it's not going to save the world.
I would be a lot more successful as well, Dr. Nadolsky, but I appreciate your contribution. It really paints a picture of how difficult of a situation this really is. But that's all I have for you today. For our listeners who want to go and learn more about you, go and support you, where can we point them toward?
Instagram's good, at Dr. Nadolsky, DrNadolsky. Check out at RP Strength, RPStrength. That's the Renaissance Periodization page. We all kind of collaborate together, but that's the best places.
Great. And all of those links will be in the show notes. But that does it for another episode of the Muscle Memoirs Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. Hey guys, Mike here. If you're interested in learning more about how to maximize your health, body composition, and performance, head over to hammerawayfitness.com where you can sign up for coaching or even just schedule an hour consult with me to get some of your training and nutrition questions answered. Also, if you enjoyed this episode as much as I did and would like to further support the growth of the Muscle Memoirs podcast, you can give a donation to the link in the show notes, leave us a review, and or share this episode with your friends, whether that be dropping the link in a group chat or putting a screenshot in your Instagram story. I truly appreciate it.